9 days until the 2025 MLB Trade Deadline. The Yankees continue their struggle, and they are sure to be active before next Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Welcome back to Bomber Boys. Justin Chevalella, joined by Dylan Price. Plenty to talk about before this deadline and about the current state of the New York Yankees. But as always, first, Dylan, the Yankees might be a mess. I'm hoping you're not a mess. How are you?
I'm doing well, Justin. It's a great day to have a great day. Continuing to work into my new role here with Catskills News out here with Bold Gold Media Group. Today, Chuck covered a press conference about some of the childcare deficits in New York State. So I know that's really exhilarating to you, but obviously a hot button issue here that I was on the scene covering today. And yeah, that was kind of the bulk of my day. How's everything going over there with you?
Still just chilling right now, but enjoying it. That's for sure. As my uncle helped me create, I'm not in, a point where I'm jobless. I'm just on vacation for now.
That's
So
good.
that it's a good way to put it, and it's starting to really annoy my mom every time I say I'm just on vacation. So I'm using it more and more. So as my vacation continues for the time being, obviously, hopefully it ends sooner rather than later. I have watched every single Yankee game there has been during my vacation. And let's just say, I wish I didn't have the time to watch them all because it has been anything but pleasant. But I'm doing well, and now we'll get into the Yankees again. The trade deadline is Thursday, July 31st at 6 o'clock Eastern Time. I'll tease it now. It seems like the Bomber Boys are going to try to go live for the deadline if all works out. We'll have our regular show on Tuesday next week and then go live on Thursday following the conclusion of the deadline. Of course, hoping the Yankees make some moves. And that being said, we've got to discuss what the Yankees need to do. We have talked about it for the last couple of weeks on this show, but really we teased it. We said that we were going to hone in and we were going to talk strictly deadline, and that is the plan today. And the biggest question that there is it worth it? And this question goes in a couple of ways. And the obvious way is it worth giving up your top prospect for this player or that player? But I want to start in a different way that Dylan, I told you off air that I kind of had a different way to frame it that still is it worth it, but it's different. My question is it actually worth it for the Yankees to be active at this deadline? And here's why I say that. I know you're looking at me, but I'm thinking more and more into it. And it is clear as day that the Yankees have more to bring in at this deadline than not, right? They need, a couple of relief pitchers. They need a starting pitcher. They need a third baseman. There's also other glaring holes that are being ignored on this roster. We obviously know about the struggles of Anthony Volpe, which have just continued out of the All-Star break. We know of the surplus of outfielders the Yankees have, the surplus of designated hitter slash first base options the Yankees have. This roster construction screams to me something that takes more than just a trade deadline to figure out. So to, expand on the question is, where would it be easier for the Yankees to actually make a World Series competitor? Is it going to be easier to do it at the deadline and mortgage a lot of your farm, or is it going to be easier to do it in the offseason, in an offseason where you're going to get Garrett Cole back? You're going to hopefully get a full season of Luis Gil. Oswaldo Cabrera will be back. Just some names, that we know the Yankees are without at the moment. And, obviously Clark Schmidt out this year as well. It really comes down to, even with the moves, can the Yankees be a World Series competitor, or are they just going to be a playoff team? And that brings it up. Is it worth it for them to even be too active at this deadline?
Yes. I think that the simple question is that yes, is it worth it? And the simple answer is yes. I don't understand even why the question's being posed. I get it because you're you and you got to have some fun with this. And you've been stewing on this one for a bit. But my perspective on this is simple, and it's been pretty consistent throughout the course of this season. You couldn't just throw your hands in the air when Garrett Cole got hurt. You couldn't just throw your hands in the air when Luis Gil got hurt. You couldn't just throw your hands in the air when Giancarlo Stanton got hurt. And the Yankees did what the Yankees have done the past couple seasons and had a pretty nice April and May. And then obviously we have beaten it to death. The June swoon came and went, and July hasn't exactly been much better for the most part for the Yankees. But the thing that I think is imperative in all of this discussion is We talked about last week the division struggles for the Yankees. We talked about the fact that they're coming off such a bad skid going into the break and now coming out of it 2-2. Not exactly what you would have expected coming out of a Brave series with a team that, you have some momentum hosting the All-Star game, and that's really all they had. You kind of wanted a sweep out of that one, and you got a Blue Jays series that is imperative that you don't just get swept again in Toronto and that the Sportsnet guys aren't throwing brooms again. So
Bad start to that, by the way.
Yeah. So I think my point for this is pretty simple. You're coming out, though, of your worst stretch of the season, and you're still 55-45, only 4 games back at the time of recording of the Blue Jays, and still firmly in the mix in the American League wild card run, and still in the mix in the American League postseason. The Yankees just got to get into the dance. And we saw that a year ago, where obviously a bit more talent on the team when you include Juan Soto having such a scorching hot season. But they're still deep. And we've talked about that throughout the course of this season, that, as much as, I almost walked out of the studio in Com Radio back at Penn State about Juan Soto leaving, the one thing that I will agree with you on now looking back is it made this team deeper. You bring in Max Fried, obviously has completely helped compensate for the loss of Garrett Cole. But you also brought in Cody Bellinger and Paul Goldschmidt, who have been two most reliable bats all season. And Giancarlo Stanton, don't look now, after his incredible playoffs a year ago, is starting to heat up now. Now, obviously, you want that in October, but my point at this is simple. You have depth right now on this roster. You don't just have Judge, Soto, Stanton, and then let's hope everybody else contributes, or let's hope somebody else contributes. Right now, you have enough depth on this roster and in this lineup that you actually look better situated for a postseason run if you add a couple pieces at the deadline. So why I go back to this and say, yes, it's worth it, is the face of your team, the face of your franchise, lost in the World Series, obviously, a year ago. This whole team did, for the most part, outside of those additions. But he's not getting any younger. Aaron Judge is not getting any younger. Max Fried, not getting any younger. Carlos Rodon's not getting any younger. Yes, there's some young stars on this team, but there's a lot of veterans. Paul Goldschmidt, who, he might not be here a year from now, 2 years from now, but so what? He's having a great season. Let's capitalize on the window when you have it. And that's my point. You're coming out of the worst stretch of the season that this Yankees team has had, and yet you're still in the mix of everything when your entire team, we poked holes in it for the past 3 weeks. Not one facet of this team outside of Aaron Judge was really blowing you away. Even Max Fried has been in his worst stretch of the season. So at this point right now, yes, it is still worth it. If they go out at the deadline and sit at their hands, then it's pretty apparent at this point that 2026 is where you're kicking the can down the road to. But that's not the New York Yankees. It's never been the New York Yankees, whether we like it or not. And that's not how I think this season is going to go. I think they're going to go balls to the walls at the deadline. I think that's exemplified in the plan of what I've kind of laid out for what I think they're going to do here. And I think it's just pretty clear at this point. This is not a Yankees team that's going to lay down quietly. They are a team that's going to contend. They are a team that is still constructed to compete for the AL pennant again this year. And I think they're going to go a little bit crazy at the deadline if my plan ends up being any semblance of what comes to fruition. But I think it's time. I don't think you can continue to waste the prime years of one of the best players that this franchise has seen in the last 2 decades.
Look, I'm in agreement with you. The reason I brought the question up was because I've been mulling it a little bit more, every time the Yankees take the field. It seems like every day there's a new issue to point to for the Yankees. It's not just that they need a third baseman, because the moment, their offense starts to click, they lose their relief pitchers, and their bullpen, I believe it's still a ERA over 7 over their last 30 games or something like that. And we've, talked about that as well. And then, the moment your relievers might start to get something, you lose Clark Schmidt in your rotation, and you're down to a rotation that at the moment is Carlos Rodon, Max Fried, Marcus Stroman, Cam Schlittler, and Will Warren. And when you look at that, the obvious answer, and we talked about this briefly last week, is that 3 of the 5 of those guys are not starting pitchers in the postseason. And that's the final 3. Obviously, Fried and Rodon are guys. But then you look at what happened to Max Fried, and we mentioned last week that he doesn't actually have as many innings under his belt in terms of one season as many as people think he has. I believe that number is either 183 or 186. I think 86 is the number. But then right after we mention that, he goes and gets a blister issue, has to leave a start early. He then has to miss the start out of the break, and now he's going to pitch tomorrow night in Toronto. So the reason I brought it up isn't just to be me. Yes, it's partially to be me. And it's starting, part of it is to provoke some of this conversation. But there is serious question if you're Brian Cashman, if you're in that front office, you have to think about it. You have to go, regardless of what moves we make, is there the path for us to, win the World Series? Not just make the playoffs, but win the World Series. The Tigers are a really damn good team with Tarek Skubal as their ace. You can, it'll be tough to get through them if you can get through them. The Blue Jays have been the Yankees' thorn this year, and that continued last night. And you hope Cam Schlittler or Max Fried over the next 2 days changes the Yankees' fate and that they can maybe salvage the final 2 games in Toronto. But I brought it up just because of how competitive, we kept saying, and it's true, the American League is wide open, but there's also very good teams. And right now, the Yankees aren't a very good team. Right now, the Yankees are a team, maybe a good team, depending on who you talk to. Obviously, they still sit with a record of 55-45, and they're second in the AL East. They lead the wild card. So that's why I brought it up. Not because I wanted to just, say, oh, no, I don't think it's worth it. I think they should stand pat. I've never been that guy. I always think that you have that opportunity. But, if something happens this week in Toronto, if you, for whatever reason, lose one more of your starters or lose one of the big bats in your lineup, it's certainly a conversation that has to be highlighted more and that a deadline can't fix, especially because I think part of the Yankees' problem and what we saw last night is that part of it is just fundamental problems. Stuff you learn in Little League, stuff that, you shouldn't be having problems with at this level, that the Yankees are having problems with. Not sliding into third base if you're Yorbit Vivas in Atlanta. Obviously, the 2 crucial throwing errors yesterday against Toronto, one by Oswald Peraza, who's been sure-handed almost all year at third base, and then one Anthony Volpe, whose 12th error is tied for the most amongst American League position players, and he's first in errors at the shortstop position. That's why I brought it up, because I think part of the Yankees' problems are more so than just something that you can fix. It's more than just a third baseman or 2 relievers and a starter. I believe it has something to do with the coaching staff. I believe it has something to do with roster construction. But I also believe that with enough talent, the Yankees can overcome that. And that's why I'm in agreement with you that at this very moment, as we shoot this on Tuesday evening before the Yankees go at it for the second game in Toronto, I am still in agreement that it's worth it. Another night or 2 of this, and maybe an injury thrown in there, then you start to really get to maybe it's not worth it. But that's why I brought it up, because I do think that there is some room for that conversation. I think not right, necessarily today, but again, the trade deadline's 9 days away. You could lose. I think they play 7 games before the deadline. You could lose all 7 of them. And then you're having this bigger conversation. Obviously, we keep talking the third base, the 2 relievers, the starter. That's what we're going to really hone in on here. But you have way too many outfielders. You can't let your young guy Dominguez play every day. It's thrown him out of rhythm. He's 0 for his last 18 now. Grisham has that monster grand slam against Atlanta. Now you want to keep him around. There's problems. There's problems that go well beyond the deadline. But I think it's, like I said, I still think you can overcome it. And I still think it is worth it to go out and pursue some of these big names.
I think you just said one name right there that it would still be surprising to see him dealt at the deadline, but something's got to change in the outfield because it's a logjam right now, and it's hurting Jason Dominguez at one of his best stretches of the season. And I love Trent Grisham. I think he's really endeared himself to a lot of Yankees fans this season. But I don't think that Trent Grisham has a long-term spot in this outfield. I don't think that's a shock to anybody. And if it is, I don't know if you've been paying any attention, but there's a towering man in Scranton right now who's been tearing it up named Spencer Jones. If he's with the team after the deadline, it is clear that he's a part of their long-term plans for the outfield. I think Cody Bellinger needs to be a part of those long-term plans. Maybe it's not in the outfield. Maybe it's at first base. I'm okay with that if ultimately Goldschmidt is not with the team. And I think that is a very, very likely reality because Cody Bellinger's got a lot more meat left on the bone of his career. So, yes, I think that there's a world where you can get Cody still on the team. You can get Spencer Jones. You can get Jason Dominguez, Judge. You can build this outfield. But Trent Grisham's not the one who needs to continue to play every day at this point. It needs to be Dominguez. And I think there's still a world where you can still get Grisham a lot of good at-bats. We talked about that a couple episodes ago, where you can still find him a lot of quality at-bats, and he can come through with a grand slam or big play in moments like that. But it is also clear that this team still does not trust Dominguez's glove and still does not trust Dominguez in these bigger spots, and they'd rather go with Grisham in this case. I mean, we see it today. Dominguez is not in the lineup. Goldschmidt's also not in the lineup because you have that Ben Rice problem too with a guy who's been really darn good that struggling to find a place for. And outside of the fact that he has been in a hot stretch recently, the other big issue that you have is that you can't play Giancarlo Stanton anywhere but designated hitter at this point. I mean, you watched him run around third base the other day, and at this point, he is barely jogging. And as much as we made fun of Bob Costas a year ago for making it sound like he was a dog that needed to be put down, Stanton is a liability on the bases. Stanton's a liability pretty much anywhere but designated hitter, and when he's hitting home runs at this point. You can't play him anywhere else. You just hope that he's trotting around the bases or hitting a double and can get in there standing up, because there's not many assets that you have room to put anywhere else. Designated hitter would help you in that regard. Stanton, I think his time is starting to look like, even despite how good he has been, looks like if he doesn't continue to play this torch stretch he's had, he could be a guy who's an odd man out in the offseason. And I know that sounds insane to say after the run he had a year ago, but the lack of ability you have to move him around makes him kind of just you can't put him anywhere else. He's a square peg that you can't put in any kind of hole. Really, it's just a square hole. So it's very frustrating, because I think there's also a very large contingent on Yankees Twitter right now that is kind of content with shuffling the deck and maybe keeping Grisham. It's not going to be Dominguez they trade, but maybe it's trading Spencer Jones. Jones seems like he's finally figuring it out, and everybody's mad that he's a late bloomer. Look at Judge. Judge was a late bloomer too. So it's very frustrating, because somebody's got to go, and it just feels like this fan base is going to be pissed off regardless of the result that comes to fruition. And the Yankees team just feels like they are going to wait as long as humanly possible to pull the trigger, and that seems to burn them every single time.
I mean, you
I'm
mentioned
very fired up about this.
I could tell. I clearly asked the right question here today, and in more ways than one, Giancarlo Stanton is the Yankees' most immovable player. He can't move out of the DH spot. He can't move around the base paths, and his contract is nearly unmovable because of how much it is, and he's got a player option after 2028. So this is why
he's not hurting the team, but like I said,
but he's also not really. I mean, yeah, I guess
helping them because
he is helping them, but
you can't move him around. And would you trade that for putting Grisham or Rice or somebody there every day and getting them those at bats? Because they can at least move.
It jams up everything, because even if Stanton could play the outfield, you open the DH spot so Judge could take a day, and then you could rotate all four outfielders. Or, if you don't need to put Judge at DH, then you can play Ben Rice and Paul Goldschmidt. There's so many more opportunities if Stanton weren't on this team. But at the same time, he's probably the Yankees' hottest hitter right now. He was their best postseason performer last year. He's not going anywhere. This offseason, I think, is crucial, which is, again, why I said it might be easier to make a World Series contender in the offseason when your acquisitions, one of them is Garrett Cole. I know we hate that term when they say, oh, he's our trade deadline acquisition, which Luis Seal's going to be the trade deadline acquisition here in a couple of weeks, or at least one of them. In a sense, that's a big get back in Garrett Cole and Oswaldo Cabrera providing some help in the infield, considering the left side of the infield can't play. I mean, there's fundamental roster construction problems with the New York Yankees. And regardless of them, because I think we're going to have to deal with them the rest of the season, the Yankees know that they still need to go get some help. So obviously now we transition to the other question of, is it worth it? Is it worth going and getting Eugenio Suarez and giving up a guy like Cam Schlittler? Is it worth it to go get that rental player who's probably bound to take off, considering I don't think the Yankees are going to want to lock him up long term because he's on the backside of his career, even though he's on pace for over 50 home runs. And George Lombard is coming up. You don't want to lock a guy up long term. So obviously, Eugenio Suarez is a rental situation for the Yankees. Is it worth giving up those prospects for him? Is it worth giving up the prospects for a starting pitcher in that same trade, maybe a Zach Gallen or a Merrill Kelly? or going over to the Pittsburgh Pirates, where it has been increasingly more said that the Yankees could be interested in Mitch Keller. Is it worth the prospects there? You see the top five going across the bottom of your screen as we speak. Of those five, Spencer Jones is the name floated the most, and I believe Ben Hess is the name floated the second most. Kind of staying away from the top two are the Yankees. But is it worth it to give up those prospects for a rental? And I'm going to start out. I'm going to answer the question I just asked first because I know we have the same answer here. The obvious answer is yes. If you're going to go out, we got past the other question of is it even worth it to go out and do stuff at the deadline? Now we're past that. We both say yes. So is it worth it to give it up? Yes. And you have to go hard because if you think this is a World Series team, well, bad news. It's not. So you really need to fill these holes that are on your roster. And how many times in the past have the Yankees hugged a prospect and it hasn't worked out? I've got the list. If I can find the list, I found the list. Greg Bird, Clint Frazier, Anthony Volpe, Gary Sanchez, in a sense, Tyler Wade, Jesus Montero, Miguel Andujar, Estevan Florial, Oswald Peraza, Chance Adams, Davy Garcia. I mean, the list just continues and can keep going. And I can even take it one step further because while I'm sitting here on my vacation that I have proclaimed it as, today I had some time. So I decided to go back through every Yankees deadline. This does not include the, moves they made in the offseason, like the Williams trade where they gave up a really good guy in Caleb Durbin, just who they've given up at deadlines in the past. The total number of people that they gave up, 24. This is since 2021's deadline, 2021 and on. They have given up 24 prospects. 15 of those 24 have appeared in the major leagues. Only 6 are currently in the major leagues. Only 1 is in the top 10 of his new farm system, and only 5 of the 24 are in the top 30 of their new respective farm system. Multiple are no longer playing baseball. So it's clear, if you've got the prospects, you might as well use them to get some guys that are proven. Suarez is clearly proven. He's on pace for 50 home runs or over 50 home runs at this point. Mitch Keller, a proven guy. We've mentioned David Bednar, another proven guy. Some of the other names we've thrown out there that aren't as highly thought of by you and I, Key Brian Hayes, Yo Moncada, Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly, Emmanuel Clase, which now it seems like the Guardians are more likely to keep him. And these guys are worth these prospects because I just read you the numbers. These prospects have not necessarily been working out in the major league levels, so you might as well go use them.
We've talked about it for years, and I'm glad you finally compiled the list. We've talked about all of those names at one point or another in the tenure of this program because it's the Yankees' biggest Achilles heel. And it's something that I don't think gets talked about enough, that the Yankees live to stash prospects who unfortunately don't come to fruition for one way or another, either because they have marinated so long in minor league baseball that when they do make the jump to major leagues, it just doesn't translate, or because they keep them there so long, eventually trade them, and by that point, it just doesn't work out. Either they bring them up themselves, they get traded, or they, one way or another, end up not coming to fruition. And that feels like for a majority of the top guys that you just listed off there, been the case. Like you said, not many of them are playing, at a high level in Major League Baseball. You don't hear a lot of Yankees former prospects that are tearing it up right now. Now, there's still quite a few former Yankees out there right now that I know you can get the list of. Caleb Durbin was one that I've loved that we talked about that can be an example. Trey Sweeney, another guy who's worth mentioning just off the top of the head. But there's just as long of a list, much longer list of guys who haven't worked out. So you'll see it in the moves that I'm projecting to make, that if I was Brian Cashman, I would make. I'm kind of gutting a chunk of the farm system, but for one way or another, it's better you do it now than continue to hold on to these guys and they lose any value that they could potentially have. Because more often than not, with all the guys you just listed off, that has been the ultimate case. And you get a guy like a Davy Garcia or an Estevan Florial, who were widely regarded across Major League Baseball as some of the top up-and-coming guys in the Yankees farm system that eventually get traded for scraps, DFA'd, or not moved at all, and they just eventually come to the end of their tenure in pinstripes. So it's definitely a long list of names that I think could get dealt at the deadline, but I think that there's guys here who just are going to be as grateful to get a second chance somewhere else and finally get that chance to crack a major league roster.
Yeah, I mean, and you think about another name you just mentioned in Trey Sweeney. Trey Sweeney, they refused to give him up at the deadline. They had to give him up in December because he was going to be drafted during the 40-man or the Rule 5 draft. That's the name of it. The Rule 5 draft. So they traded him away for Victor Gonzalez and Yorbit Vivas, who, Victor Gonzalez no longer a New York Yankee and Yorbit Vivas struggling yet again. So, I mean, you look at that and you think about some of these prospects that the Yankees are going to be in similar situations with, whether it be this offseason or next offseason. And you know for a fact that you have to get them either to a new organization and get something in return, or you've got to get them on your own 40-man. Either way, you've got to find some new guys at the major league level. And obviously, that is what the Yankees are considering. I just want to go back to the point about the 24 total guys traded over the last couple trade deadlines. The one that sticks out probably the most would be Josh H. Smith, who's with Texas, went in the Gallo trade, 241 career hitter with 29 home runs, 117 runs batted in. He's had the most run in the major leagues. Ken Waldichuk, who is currently in AAA, had a good run with Oakland. J.P. Sears has been a starter for them as well. And obviously, the name that I think a lot of Yankee fans are stuck up on is Agustin Ramirez, who was traded in the Jazz Chisholm trade last year, 241, 14 home runs, and 44 runs batted in this season. It's his rookie season with Miami. But again, where do you put him if he was even here? That's another question. You see these guys right now, and a couple years down the road, you're like, oh, you could still have Agustin Ramirez, or you could still have Josh H. Smith, or you could have this guy or that guy. Where are they fitting, right? Because the Yankees, as much as we're talking about the gaps they don't have a lot of room for, an Agustin Ramirez right now anyway, because apparently JC Esquera is highly thought of around the league too, and the Yankees would just be trading him if it came down to it. So at the end of the day, you might as well part ways with the prospects if you're not going to have room for them anyway. And I think that we can get on to the next little bit here, and that's talking about some of the trade deadline targets and some trade proposals that maybe, the Yankees will come to fruition, maybe not. All we've heard about so far is a report that came out the other day that said the Yankees and Diamondbacks have, exchanged names in a possible deal. It was 5 prospects from the Yankees heading back to the Diamondbacks. The Yankees, in return, would get, obviously, Eugenio Suarez. Merrill Kelly was in that trade, and there was a reliever thrown in there as well. Yes, Jalen Beeks. That was from Ricky Ricardo, the Spanish radio voice of the Yankees. Lombard and Jones not in there, but Cam Schlittler would have been in there as well. First of all, let's be honest here. The Yankees are not going to go make a trade where they go get every single piece they need at the deadline in one move. That move right there kind of does just that. So I think that one is relatively off the table, and there's going to be plenty of scouts for Cam Schlittler today. He's kind of on this, just show what you can get. An audition for his next team at this point is what I believe the Yankees are doing with him here tonight, and what they did when they called him up a couple of weeks ago. But starting out, I think we're both going to have a trade for Eugenio Suarez, so we might as well start there. Dylan, what does your trade look like to get Suarez in pinstripes?
You kind of alluded to it for a little bit of this. I went back and forth on whether or not Beeks would be a part of this package, but I think there's an easy way to acquire 2 other relievers that I think add a lot of value to this roster. So ultimately, I am going to still make a 5 prospect trade. That's why you saw me counting there. I still have 5 guys going to the Diamondbacks in exchange for Eugenio Suarez and Merrill Kelly. I think Merrill Kelly is kind of the less attractive option of the starting options with Zach Gallen. I think ultimately his age is definitely a part of that equation. I still think there's a lot to like about what he can add. He's reliable. He's, been kind of aged well with time, and he's been reliable, durable. He's a guy who I think could fit in as just a, what you're going to get kind of piece of this rotation. And right now the Yankees need that, because you have Max Fried, you have Carlos Rodon. Rodon's been volatile at points. You're going to have Luis Gil back, but Luis Gil is coming back from a serious injury. What could he bring to the table? Merrill Kelly can provide a bit of a safety net for that. You lost Clark Schmidt, which we've talked about ad nauseum, but he's going to be out into next season as well. So getting a guy like this who, yeah, he might not be with the team next year, but at least looking at what you have in this rotation right now, Clark Schmidt was a sure-handed guy who you lost. So even as you construct this rotation for the remainder of the season, you look at the top three guys, Fried, Rodon, then you'd have Heel. For me, then it would be Merrill Kelly, and then you can kind of play with it from there, whether it's Will Warren, Marcus Stroman, Ryan Yarbrough. You kind of see it how it works out because Yarbrough is obviously injured right now. Stroman's been back and forth, ebbing and flowing his entire Yankee tenure. And you have Will Warren, who we've talked about, has never pitched this long into his season in his career, and especially this is his first season at the major league level. So for me, getting Suarez obviously is the thing the Yankees covet most at the deadline. It's what every Yankee fan, every Yankees analyst, pretty much most analysts are saying right now is it's the team that makes the most sense for Suarez, and it's the Yankees' best move to make because they have a glaring need at the hot corner. Merrill Kelly is the reason I put a little bit more into this package because there's no situation here where I think it's just Eugenio Suarez for 1, 2, 3 guys. I think Merrill Kelly or Zach Gallen will be in this trade. I think Jalen Beeks could be in this trade too, and they get a starter somewhere else. I just don't see a world where, not to tip my hand here, they go out, they get Suarez, and then they also go out and get Mitch Keller. Because then the farm system at that point is going to be decimated. You're going to lose top guys. So who's in this package for me? Cam Schlittler. I think it's pretty obvious at this point. I unfortunately, we talked about this. We would like to see Schlittler stay as a Yankee for a while, but I think Schlittler, as you said perfectly, is auditioning tonight for his next team. And he might get another chance to pitch for the Yankees. He might be a Yankee beyond the trade deadline. I just don't see it likely. I think if there's going to be a top guy that goes, it's going to be Schlittler. Beyond that, I also think you lose Everson Pereira, a major league ready bat who just doesn't have a fit, especially with the outfield logjam we talked about. Then I think you lose Clayton Beeter too. I think they're going to find other guys in terms of relievers, and I think Beeter's a guy they like a lot. He's been a Sam Breed and golden child. They've kind of developed him in their mold as a reliever and brought him back from top to bottom, but I think Beeter doesn't necessarily have a long-term fit with a team that's kind of found a lot of their relievers elsewhere and not necessarily developed their own guys at this stage with Matt Blake. And then after that, I threw in 2 other prospects because I do think you got to add a little bit more to get that deal done. I don't think those are 3 guys that are enough to get it. I got another top 15 guy in Cade Smith, who's 23 years old, but still in Hudson Valley right now. And then after that, a lower level guy in Grayson Carter, who's 22 years old and just outside of the top 25 in the 28 slot right now, I believe, in the most recent top 30 rankings. So that's 5 top 30 guys. That's a lot. I mean, that's a lot. That's a very, very nice chunk of your farm system. That's guys who it seems like they have long-term plans for. Maybe not Pereira, but Schlittler, Beeter, and maybe one of the Smith or Carter guys are a part of that Breen golden child rotation as well. But you're also getting 2 top-tier talents who can be the difference between World Series number 28 and not. This is my high-profile trade of the deadline. The other 2, I think, are moves that I think they can make and will make. But Suarez and Kelly for Schlittler, Pereira, Beeter, Smith, and Carter.
As you were talking, I got to do some extra research here, and I realized that Mitch Keller not only has this year, but he has 3 more years under contract for whatever team can go out and get him. Obviously, it's more and more likely that Pittsburgh parts ways with him. Why? I don't know. They just need bats. Honestly, that's all Pittsburgh really needs. And while I was thinking about that, I decided to jump ship to Mitch Keller coming over to New York. I'll get there in a second. I'll go back to my Suarez trade. So I replace you and Merrill Kelly, who I agree, if the Yankees go and get a starter from the Diamondbacks, it's going to be Merrill Kelly. He's having a good year for them at the moment. 9-5, a 3.32 ERA, 21 starts, 122 innings, 118 strikeouts, and a 106 WHIP. All around a 3.76 career ERA in 161 games started. But I think here in this trade, I'm going to go with they go get Beeks instead of Kelly. So they still get one of the arms they need. They get one of the bullpen arms. You bring over Suarez and Beeks. And I still have Cam Schlittler going in that trade. I also had Everson Pereira, and I also had Cade Smith. Those were the top 3 I had thought of. It's funny how our minds really work alike. That being said, I fully expect Clayton Beeter to not be moved in this deal. I don't think it makes sense for the Yankees to move him here. Now, with Beeks not being as high profile necessarily as Merrill Kelly, I think the Yankees only would need one other prospect here. And that's where I get a little hung up, and I'm not really sure who to put. I'm honestly not exactly great. I'll be transparent here with ranking prospects and knowing what's a decent return. But is this potentially a place where Oswald Peraza could be shipped off to, right? He's a guy that's been in the major leagues. They'll need a third baseman, the Diamondbacks will, for the rest of the season, and it's a good change of scenery. And that's how I'm gonna put this deal together. I don't know if Peraz has actually moved here. I don't really think so. But for a guy that doesn't know all the ins and outs, I'm going to put him here. And I'm going to say that's how the Yankees get it done. That being said, there's also a chance you see someone else move to match a little bit more contract, because with Suarez's contract and Beek's contract, compared to just trading away a bunch of, the relievers, or not relievers, the prospects, it doesn't add up. And obviously the Yankees have been very hesitant to go over that extra tax threshold. Is this a place we see maybe a guy like Trent and his contract move? I don't think the Yankees have plans to move him, but you have to think that way as well when you think about the Yankees because of the contract, or the total salary. For now, I put Peraza as my fourth. So it's Smith, Peraza, Schlittler, and Pereira going for Suarez and Beeks. And obviously you could see that other name, change out. I also want to say something about Peraza real quick. This is completely off topic or off track from our trade deadline talk, but he was asked last night after the game about, how his career has basically been a disappointment, about how there's so much, around him potentially being moved, or at least a new third baseman coming in, and how he's handling it. The question was asked in a horrible way, and Peraza's response was basically, yeah, I know my career's a disappointment. Look, he's a good guy. Everything we've heard about him, he goes out there every day. He represents the pinstripes well. It's really unfortunate that was the question he was asked. And the other unfortunate part is obviously that he hasn't been able to put up the numbers we all expected. But, cut the guy some slack. I don't think anyone would really have had Oswald Peraza being the third baseman of the New York Yankees. Let's be real. The Yankees didn't even have him being the third baseman of the Yankees this year. The injuries ended up leading to him being that. So I still think a change of scenery would do him well. I'm not saying he's going to go be a 300 hitter, but I could see the guy being a 240, 250 hitter off the bench if he could just, get that change of scenery and work with the new coaching staff. That being said, let's flip on. Dylan, plenty more to go. I told you I'm going to have Mitch Keller coming over. I'm going to wait for the return on the Mitch Keller deal until you tell us what your next deal is.
So I have a high profile deal to round this out. So I'll kind of go with a lesser deal here to kind of just bide the time. So in my scenario, you have Suarez, Kelly now as a part of this team. Seemed like outside of Peraza, we had similar packages. I have Peraza going in my last trade, so I'll save that here. But I have a trade that I think could also see Oswald Peraza find his way into it if this was the team. But
I think he can find his way in almost any trade. Sorry to cut you off.
Will find his way into a trade.
Yes.
He's a major league ready third baseman, even though he's had his ebbs and flows with the Yankees. I think he's ready to get his shot somewhere else. And all three of these teams I could see the Yankees trading with will end up having a hole at the hot corner, I think, at some point in this deadline cycle. So my next team here, though, is a little bit basic. It's the Colorado Rockies. I mean, I don't think we're shocked that they're going to be making a move or two at the deadline. I don't think they're going to make some crazy high-profile move with the Yankees. I don't think Ryan McMahon's going to be a Yankee, especially if you already have Suarez. And in this scenario, they do. But I'm going to go here with a little bit funny once I say why I did this. But I think all three of these names just fit to be in this trade. So Jake Bird in this scenario is a guy I have had talked about, I've alluded to. I don't think it's going to take a lot to get him because he has really had a little bit of a rough stretch here. He's a free agent in 2029. He's arbitration eligible in 2026. So you'd have this guy as a part of this picture for the longer haul here. He's a guy who, has had a bit of a rough stretch as of recently, but is a 4.01 ERA on the season, 3-1 record. His WAR's 1.0 and a 1.413 walks hits per innings pitched, 61 strikeouts and 51 2/3 pitched. He's a righty, big towering guy, got a hell of a beard that is going to have to come off and get at least cleaned up a little bit with the Yankees. And I have them sending over Brendan Jones and Griffin Herring, two top 30 prospects, but not anybody who's going to really burn you too bad. Brendan Jones on the back end of things at 29, and Griffin Herring at 25. So 2 low-end top 30 guys, 2 guys who just sound like they're going to be Colorado Rockies, just like Jake Bird. You get another Bird jersey back for Yankees fans who were loving Greg Bird years ago. So Bird can be the word again. Brendan Jones and Herring can go to Colorado because they just sound like Rockies. But on a more real note, I think that's about the best deal that you would get for the Rockies. And I think Bird adds just another reliable arm, a guy that can come in the fold right now, especially with Fernando Cruz hurt, Ryan Yarbrough hurt, and kind of play that role where he can be maybe not a high leverage arm, but certainly a guy who can eat innings and do so at a reliable rate. So I have Jake Bird as my second acquisition for the Yankees here. Well, second trade, third acquisition. But I've got a big high profile arm as my final one. So Jake Bird for Brendan Jones and Griffin Herring.
Bird 3-1 with a 4.01 ERA and 42 appearances with the Rockies, 51 2/3, 61 strikeouts, a 141 WHIP. Certainly exciting. He has struggled though over his last 15 games, a 9.98 ERA and a 13.50 ERA over.
Keep struggling.
His
Drop that value down, Jake. I know what you're doing.
I mean, maybe a 1-for-1 move there. But yeah, certainly like it. I think, as much as I can evaluate prospect, rankings, I would say that that's a fair trade. Now, I'm going to my second trade. I would save this for last, but I've already kind of, hinted at it. So my next move is another big one, and it's Mitch Keller. And going, to Mitch Keller, he's been good for, Pittsburgh. He signed the 5-year deal. I just talked about it. 3.5 years left on that contract. I'm shocked his name's being floated, but it's being floated more and more seemingly each day. I believe it's Noah Lyles out in Pittsburgh has been, rumoring that, the Yankees have been interested. He's 3-10. Keep the record away because it's the Pittsburgh Pirates. 3.48 ERA in 20 games, 20 starts, 119 innings, 92 strikeouts. My return is going to be one of the 2 arms of either Chase Hampton or Brock Selvage. Now, Chase Hampton has been injured all year, the UCL injury, Tommy John, so you haven't gotten to see him. And Brock Selvage is a really highly thought of, it seems, lefty thrower in the system. He's in Double-A, 2.92 ERA. He's actually gone through rookie, Single-A, and Double-A. I believe that rookie start was just an injury start there. But all around this season, a 2.92 ERA in 10 games, 9 games started. I believe the Yankees, if you're getting Mitch Keller, you don't need one of those guys, right? Because you think about it, you have Cole, you have Fried, you have Rodon, all locked up long-term. You'd have Keller locked up long-term, and you'd have Will Warren, who either would end up getting shipped out or Clark gets shipped out once he comes back a year later. And then I'm going to go with Rock Riggio. I don't know if the Yankees are really interested in moving him, but you have to think about what Pittsburgh wants. Pittsburgh is going to want bats, right? That has been their biggest problem for years. I think those 2 prospects, both in the top 30, I believe actually both in the top 20, would get that deal done. Rock Riggio, number 24, rather. So both in the top 25, they get that deal done. The Yankees have a starter. And if you mix it with my other trade with Suarez and Beeks, you got everything you need. You just need an extra arm in the bullpen. So that's where I go. Dylan, thoughts on that trade?
I like it. I mean, I think where there's smoke, there's fire, and it seems like the PPG, shout out former Pittsburgh writer Andrew Destin, a good friend of ours. PPG, when they say something, you listen, and it feels like right now all the buzz right there with Keller gets you kind of stirring that there might be a move to be made for the Yankees if they were to do it. I think that's a hell of a package. I think it's a big package, obviously, but I do think it's a deal that could make some sense for the Yankees to make. And I think with, the reality too of what Carlos Rodon's future with the team could look like, the reality of Cole coming back from a big time injury, Schmidt eventually coming back from an injury, getting a guy like that who's reliable versus you have a older guy, 36-year-old in Kelly that you already projected and I projected as well as potential trades for the team. I think it makes sense because the reality is that you're going to have an older rotation. So with a guy with Keller who's got a lot of team control, and for $55 million or so, it's not a very expensive price tag as far as pitchers go and starting pitchers go this day and age. So I like it. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think that's I mean, that's a hell of a deadline for the Yankees, and I know you've got one more move still
Oh,
left. So,
I wanted to ask you about that deal. Let me first. It is Noah Heil.
yes, and
It is Noah Heil. So what do you say?
you also did not have Kelly in yours. I was morphing our deals together. You had Beeks, which
I
you get
beat.
that
Yes.
lefty checked off too. So
Yes.
I think in your case, you're getting a high upside guy, kind of like the Zach Gallen type that we talked about. So that you're right in that regard.
And I want to ask you about my trade there for Mitch Keller, and I want to know if you'd be interested, right? If you're the Yankees, in throwing in an extra prospect, doesn't have to be top 25 or top 30, whatever, and getting another guy Pittsburgh is reportedly shopping and putting him in pinstripes again, not necessarily to fill third base, but to help out around the infield, and that's IKF, right? And I know it would crowd things, but I want to go back to a weird situation that happened last night. Meredith Marakovitz asked Aaron Boone why they had seen Anthony Volpe with ice on his right shoulder after the last few games, and if he was okay physically. And Aaron Boone just said yes, and then made a weird face and moved on. To me, if I followed the Yankees for a while, following the Yankees, that tells me one big thing: Anthony Volpe is not fully physically okay, right? And here we are talking about Volpe again, and we're not going to hang on this long. But there's a chance that he's injured. There's a chance that he's got to go on the IL. And of course, the Yankees don't really have anyone to back him up. Now, if you get IKF, he'd really be, a platoon bat, probably not the role he's looking. But, if something comes of this of Volpe in the next couple days, I wouldn't be opposed to that. I was wondering your thoughts if maybe this is on top of Suarez. Would it really be worth getting IKF?
I think it's tough. I mean, not to tip my hand, but I have another depth piece in a big time trade that I have to round everything out here. That again, this guts the farm system. Both of our trades gut the farm system, but who cares at this point? I think IKF's a bit of a higher end version of what I have in my trade. But listen, Yankees fans love him. We would get to reuse an iconic Bomber Boys clip, so I'm not complaining for the sake of the brand. But as it really
him and Duke Ellis, Yankee legends.
Unfortunately, I don't think it does get done that way. Just because I think that's a guy who deserves more at-bats than he would get in this scenario. But you're right. I mean, if there's guys banged up, if there's guys who could need time off, particularly in the infield, IKF's proven he's more than capable of filling that void. And it could be a good fit. I don't necessarily think it'll happen, but I do think that we see the same vision with needing an extra infielder for sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to put it out there. Obviously, we've talked about Volpe enough. I was honestly going to put up the pinstripe panic meter and ask about that whole scenario, but I came out earlier because we're talking about potential deals. Volpe has been struggling. He's batting in the 9-hole for the first time all season tonight. And you had that multi-homer game. Everyone thinks he's back. He has a bad game yesterday, and everyone thinks he's gone again. He's been hit or miss. He had a good postseason last year. And honestly, I'm kind of in the boat where I pose the IKF question more considering if something happens over the next couple of days with Volpe or anyone than anything else, because I really don't think we've seen it. The Yankees have a problem benching Volpe at any point. So really you'd get IKF to waste away on the bench. So I don't really see it happening, but I figured obviously pose the question and see what you have. Now, you say you have a backup as part of a depth piece as part of a bigger trade here. Now, we had texted. Was it 2 real trades and 1 outrageous trade that you'd like to see but won't happen, or was it 3 real trades and then 1 outrageous trade that won't happen?
3 and 1 because I figured we'd go balls to the walls to end the show.
So this is your 3rd real one.
Yes,
and it's a blockbuster is how you're putting this out there.
It's not as big as Eugenio Suarez and Merrill Kelly that trade, but it does mean that and I'll put the ticker up again. It does mean that one of these top 5 guys is no longer a New York Yankee. So
I'm going to wait. Can I take a guess?
Okay.
Well, I'm between 3 and 4 here. I'm between Jones and Hess.
Neither.
Oh, all right. Go ahead.
George No, I'm kidding.
I think everyone's agreed there that Lombard is untouchable.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would have stopped tuning in or completely unsubscribed if you're not subscribed. But they would have unsubscribed if I would have suggested Lombard gets traded. So here's what I've got. I think this kind of plays into your same thought of needing a long-term option in the rotation. And that's where you made the trade with Keller. So for me, the final list I'll give you of the acquisitions when it's done. I won't run you through every single prospect that I'm shipping away because just like you, it's going to be a lot by the end of this segment. So I'll start with the guys who are just added into this trade to really get it over the hump. So for the Miami Marlins, who are a longtime trade partner of the Yankees, they love making trades with the Yanks. Happened last year. Seems like it happens every couple years. I think it happens in back-to-back years. Graham Pauley becomes a New York Yankee. This is a guy who is 24 years old, kind of just a depth piece. It's a tough time to make the trade because Connor Norby's out right now. But Graham Pauley, he is a 24-year-old from Alpharetta, Georgia. He's been traded a couple times, moved around a little bit. He's played 2 games at first base this year, 6 at second, 26 at third, and 1 at center field. He's played all over throughout the course of his career. He's had just 94 at-bats, 19 hits in that time this season. All in all, 126 at-bats, so not much more, only 4 more hits, although 2 of those 4 were home runs. Just 2 career home runs at the major league level. 202 average this season. That's what that equates to, and a 262 on base percentage. Not going to light the world on fire, but adds you some positional versatility, which I think would be needed. And I think we both see that potential void with the potential injuries you could see. Plus, you get into the later month, you need a guy who could be reliable. And in a trade that I see Oswald Peraza being a part of as one of the centerpieces, I think the Yankees are going to need a depth piece. So Graham Pauley fits that. Feels like he would just be an analytics guy. Kind of a big time acquisition as far as a reliever. He's the lefty for me. You check that box. I have Cade Gibson in this trade, a guy with a 2.70 ERA on the season who spun 30 innings, and he's even started a game. 2-4 record. He's a younger guy, but is at 27 years old, a homegrown guy for the Marlins, but a guy who made his debut this season and has pitched pretty well. I could see them wanting to keep him for the long term. But when you can put him into this package, and for the Yankees, when you can get him, he's a top flight lefty reliever who I think could develop into a high leverage arm. Think a Luke Weaver type down the road. And a guy who was kind of built as a starter and then develops into a top tier reliever. To me, that's Cade Gibson. So I've got Gibson, I've got Pauley. And now who's the top guy in this trade? I think you need a guy for the future. I think you need a guy who's having the worst season of his career by far. And I think you also get a guy who won a Cy Young Award in 2022, but then also had Tommy John surgery in 2023. I'm talking about Sandy Alcantara, a 7.14 ERA this season, a 1.49 whip, 73 strikeouts, 39 walks. You are betting a lot in terms of what I have in this trade on him panning out with Matt Blake. But Jazz Chisholm wasn't exactly having his best season of his career when the Yankees acquired his services a year ago from Miami. And that tanked his value. And in this case, I think that tanks his value. I think the Yankees get a former Cy Young winner. Again, former Cy Young winner within the last 3 years, plus a top potential lefty reliever and a depth piece in Graham Pauley for not nearly as high as a price as you could have got him in the offseason or 2 years ago. But it's still a high price. I have Bryce Cunningham. Yes, I have Bryce Cunningham in this trade, and he's a top 5 pitcher in this organization. But obviously, this is an organization that you're banking on. If you get Alcantara to work out, you're also going to have Merrill Kelly in that rotation. You're banking on there not being a spot for him in the next year or two anyways, maybe 2 years if everything works out with Alcantara. So he's the top prize of this trade alongside Oswald Peraza. I also have a ladder arm here in Thatcher Hurd, who's 2028 expected, 22-year-old guy, 23rd prospect in the organization as part of this trade. I also have Rock Riggio in this trade. I think just he's not going to have a long-term fit with this team, and it's better to trade him now, shocking Yankees, when he's got some good potential before it's too late. And then I do have another top guy, a 16th prospect in the organization, who's 24 years old. He could play and probably play at the majors now and kind of fit in for Graham Pauley because he can play the corner positions, and that's Rafael Flores. So for me, it's Cunningham, Peraza, Hurd, Riggio, and Flores. That's 10, 12 guys from the organization traded out, but you do get back, in my scenario for the Yankees at this deadline, Eugenio Suarez, who's immediately your starting third baseman, Merrill Kelly and Sandy Alcantara, whether you like it or not, for Alcantara's sake, both go into the starting rotation. What happens from there? Maybe it even means Will Warren's traded in a separate trade. I don't know. You also add Cade Gibson, Jake Bird to the bullpen. And then, like I said, you get Graham Pauley as a depth piece. It's a lot. It's a massive deadline. It sees you top or part ways with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 arms out of the future of your farm system and a couple potential top flight bats of the future, but it also sees you add guys who could be the difference between you winning a World Series or not.
Yeah, I think that's a big trade there with the Marlins, and I don't even think I've really been considering the Marlins as a possibility for trades. Now, the Marlins
There's
8.5
someone that
games
comes out
out.
of left field.
And they're 8.5 games out, so I don't really know why that's of the wild card. So I don't even know why I'm not really considering them. Yeah, I think the thing with Cade Gibson is he's a young guy. I mean, 27, but relative in terms of his career, it's his rookie year, 2-4, 270 ERA, 23 appearances, 30 innings pitched. He seems like a guy that might have a future in Miami, which is weird to say because they seemingly trade off anyone that's part of their future. I mean, this trade that you proposed would do exactly that. But I mean, I don't hate the trade. I just think maybe the Gibson there. I guess it really depends. 8.5 games out. You've got a couple games in hand before the deadline. This is a team that could be 4.5 games out of the wild card before the deadline comes up. I don't think they've fully agreed to selling yet, but this ownership group has been anything but helpful. If you think back to the year the Yankees almost traded for, I believe it was Pablo Lopez, and they came in last second. I believe it was Lopez for Torres, and they ended up, vetoing it right before it happened. So I don't think it's out of, left field really, especially Alcantara, because of what he's been able to, do this year in particular. And the Yankees have always been linked to him. And obviously you hope that Matt Blake could get him going. For me, my third trade, it's nothing special. It's a reliever from Washington. You could honestly go to their bullpen and find anyone with good numbers. That's acting like their bullpen has people with good numbers. This Washington team has really been a struggle for the last couple of years. 1-4 with a 4.68 ERA in 38 games. It's Kyle Finnegan. Has had a really solid career overall, a 3.68 career ERA. Honestly, the laptop crashed. I lost what prospects were going in the deal for Finnegan, and honestly, I don't think I'm going to try to find them. It won't take much to get Kyle Finnegan, in my opinion. I think, this Washington team has not only accepted the rebuild, but they've also accepted the terms of the fact that it's going to be a really long rebuild. So I think they'll take a couple young guys, one or two, nothing more, unless the Yankees put someone else in that deal. But I think just, one or two prospects, probably outside the top 15. You get Kyle Finnegan, a strong righty, to go with the, Jalen Beeks in my scenario, and obviously Mitch Keller and Suarez, the big name there. So those are my three realistic options for the Yankees. But as we said earlier, there is a little bit of an unrealistic sense that Dylan and I always like to enjoy. And Dylan, you have a huge smile. I think you cooked something big up.
I did.
I hope we didn't cook the same thing up, because if we did, I'm going to try to change mine in the next couple of moments to give us some more, unrealistic possibilities. But let me see. I'm trying to read into Dylan. Him and I know each other quite well at this point. I think Dylan went over to the Cleveland Guardians.
Good guess.
So I'm wrong.
You are wrong.
That means my possibility is still there. Honestly, I don't have a second option after that. I kind of just went thinking that you and I took the same option.
I did have two options. I know who your guy is, I'd assume then.
Not one guy. Mortgage the entire farm for two. Anyway, go ahead.
I mortgaged the entire farm for one. There's a story I was listening to the other day on WFAN, and I got really pissed off because it got to the point, Justin, that you and I think we talked about it. I almost called in because my thought was, you got nothing better to talk about the week before the All-Star break except Livy Dunn failing to buy Babe Ruth's apartment. And then I got to thinking about it. Why would you want to buy an apartment in New York City? Why would Livy Dunn, outside of the fact that she's a burgeoning star and probably looking to spark a career, and New York City's not that far from Pittsburgh, that would be the more legitimate reason to think about it. Why would she want to buy a house in New York City? And then I really got to thinking about it. Paul Skeens. He doesn't seem like he's going to be a Pirate long. That's it. That's the basis for this. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. In my unrealistic trade, the Yankees get the ace of all aces. They get a guy who was on the opposite side of the podium at the All-Star Media Day a week ago with Aaron Boone next to Scooble, who everybody thinks could be a Yankee, a Met, or a Dodger now. Yeah, I'm going to go back to the guy that everybody was thumping for. It's Paul Skeens, baby. That glorious mustache is coming to the Bronx, and it's going to take a lot, and it is a lot. So in this unrealistic trade, everything else that I did doesn't count. So I can go back to the drawing board here, because if they get him, I don't think anybody would give a crap who they gave up to get him. So in this scenario, see, it's perfectly timed with the ticker. Number 3, Jones. Sorry, buddy, you're out of here. Go strike out in Pittsburgh. Number 5, Bryce Cunningham. Sorry, buddy, you're out of here. You're heading to Pittsburgh. Cam Schlittler, you're heading to Pittsburgh. Everson Pereira, you're heading to Pittsburgh. And Clayton Beeter, you're heading to Pittsburgh. And then I'll even throw in probably another pitcher or two. I would imagine Will Warren or somebody else goes. You're going to get controlled arms. You're going to get guys who are bright futures. You're going to get 2 top 5 guys, and you're going to get a hell of a potential bat for the future in Spencer Jones. It's a huge package. It depletes the farm system to the highest degree. It gets you a lot of arms, and I still don't think it would be nearly enough for the guy who's probably the best pitcher in baseball as you look ahead to the next 5-year window. It probably take more than that. This was kind of just off the dome because I was thinking of a crazy trade. And for me, I think it's Paul Skeens. I think he's a Yankee. I throw reckless abandon. Let's throw caution to the wind. Everything out the window. Paul Skeens is a Yankee. The farm system's gone. Scranton's going to be playing with you and I next year because nobody's going to be left in the organization. And that's my trade. Skeens is a Yankee.
So does that take Scooble out of consideration after
Nope. They're going to get rid of Cole. They're going to get rid of Fried. Skeens and Scooble's the future, baby.
I'll say this: if for whatever reason you're right, which I don't think you're going to be, it's not going to happen. If you're right by any means, I'll bring the mustache back for a full year.
It's not that big, and like I don't know. There's got to be
another thing, but I want it's an excuse to bring to bring the mustache back.
Deal.
Anyway, I just want to touch on Scooble real quick because it's an interesting conversation. Scooble is set to land $400 million after next season. The question is whether it comes from the Yankees, Mets, or Dodgers. That was from Buster Olney on the ESPN broadcast the other day. Look, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to say the Yankees are going to trade for him. I'm just saying it's pretty interesting that the Yankees are already being floated, and I believe Rodon's contract would be towards the end there, so it wouldn't be too much overlap. Just saying. That would be fun, especially if they get Skeens too. That would be probably the best rotation to ever live. Maybe, maybe not. But I'm going to go with my unrealistic trade. And I already kind of, put it out there. We mentioned it a couple weeks ago. Jose Ramirez. But I'm also putting Emmanuel Clase in there. You're not going to Cleveland for one. You're going for both. And for me, it's just like you. It's a big package. I'm keeping Lombard. To me, if you get Ramirez, Lombard, you're the shortstop of the future, right? Honestly, I'd put Anthony Volpe in this trade, but I know the Yankees wouldn't do it. Spencer Jones, Ben Hess, Roderick Arias. I don't know. Cam Schlittler, since I guess we're going back to those, since this is the unrealistic situation. Cade Smith, I think that's a fine 5 to throw out there. You need more. You need a lot more. But that's a start. That's my unrealistic possibility. You don't like it as much as I liked yours. Again, I lost my trades when my laptop crashed, so I'm just
yeah. I think Cleveland's not stupid enough to make that trade. Pittsburgh is. That's the thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Cleveland's actually a well-run organization. Pittsburgh, take nothing away from the fact that it's a gorgeous ballpark. You've been there now. I was supposed to go with you. Thank goodness, I guess I didn't because that car didn't make it back.
Hey, here's what I'm going to say. My new car, it's great. I love it. But yeah,
if we go to Pittsburgh, I'm driving. I don't know where you're going.
You know what? Yes, I'm done. Actually, my mom told me I have to stop driving everywhere because that's how I got in the accident. Anyway, you're right. Pittsburgh would more likely be that team to make that stupid trade. Cleveland is smarter. Honestly, I think there's some other teams that would be stupid to make a big blockbuster trade. So I hope that Brian Cashman is calling all of them. I think over the next 9 days, we're going to have plenty of headlines. And I really think that, you should probably follow us on Instagram and Twitter at the Bomber Boys Pod. Subscribe to our YouTube, the Bomber Boys Podcast, and of course, follow us on Spotify at Bomber Boys Podcast, because I believe the next couple days are going to get hectic, and we're going to try in some way or another, whether it's just updates or whether it's be some quick videos chiming in on our thoughts. We are going to have our thoughts out there as the Yankees go and get it. Dylan, I want you real quick as we wrap up this show. When do you think the first ball drops here?
Sunday.
So what was that? What is that? 5 days before the deadline? 4?
Yep. I think Suarez is a Yankee on Sunday.
You think Suarez is the first ball to drop?
I do. I think the Yankees are close, probably. If Ricky Ricardo says it, he's one of those guys that I think is worth listening to. And he doesn't have anything to gain from just throwing fodder out there to the media, just kind of like Curry. I think he's one of those guys who he knows he's in the ins right now. And I think if Schlittler dazzles today, it expedites the kind of way things go. Just because I think there's a scenario where if he has a really good start that ups the Yankees deal to the point that they don't have to throw in anybody else, like that's outstanding outside of Pereira, Beater, one of those guys, or both those guys. But outside of that, I think Suarez is the first guy, and I think it happens on Sunday to the Yanks.
So I agree. I think Suarez is the first guy. I think it happens Thursday, not next Thursday, the 31st. This Thursday. The Yankees have an off day. They travel back to the Bronx. What better way to get the crowd excited for a weekend series against a team that I don't remember which team's in town? Is it the Rays this weekend?
Yes.
It's the Phillies this weekend. What a fun series. You have Suarez debut there. You have the day off. You might as well make the trade. It's always easier to make the trade when you're at home or going home. You're holding up a finger, which means you're telling me to stop so you can say something. I want to keep talking, but go ahead.
Jazz debuted against the Yankees last year.
Against the Yankees. Jazz debuted against the Yankees. Oh, I love when Jazz
against the Phillies. He almost fought the Philly fanatic. You know what?
Oh my! Well, I think Suarez does the same. I think that ball drops, and I guess in my scenario,
the Philly fanatic too.
No, because it's a home game, so Fanatic won't be there. You might be a Yankee fan just for the fun of it, but honestly, it wouldn't just be Suarez. Obviously, Jalen Beeks in my scenario, and Merrill Kelly in yours. But I think it's going to be fun this year, and I think. Back to the question that we asked at the beginning, I think it's going to be worth it. I think the Yankees have what it takes. I think they just need to fill those holes. I think you agree. Dylan, anything fun coming up besides the deadline?
Can't think of anything.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Maybe we go to the stadium this weekend or early next week. I'm just saying.
It's a potential option.
Anyway, as I said last week, my next fun time is when we're back here next week for the next edition of Bomber Boys. And I hope your week is full with more of these smiles than with the mad face. Yep, wanted to bring it back because I knew that's how Dylan would react. That's Dylan Price. I'm Justin Chevalella. Thanks for tuning in to Bomber Boys. We'll see you next time.